economic nexus does not require physical presence at all. It is going to correlate with a set level of sales or gross receipts activity. And if you meet that economic nexus, then you are required to register, collect, and file returns and remit the tax. So that is going to be what you are required to do if you exceed nexus. So when we figure out where do we have an obligation to collect tax, the states have defined the threshold. Now, in the South Dakota v. Wayfair case, the threshold was set at $100,000 or 200 transactions. However, we have variations that include up to a $500,000 sales threshold only, like we have in California and Texas. We have states that have a $100,000 threshold with no transactions. We've got that in North Dakota, for example, and Iowa. We also have states with a middle range. We have Alabama and Mississippi at 250,000 with no transaction threshold. And then we also have states that started out with this 100,000 or 200 transactions. And similar to what Sheila talked about being told to deregister, a lot of the states figured out that they were catching a lot of very, very small businesses. And so they actually dropped that 200 transaction threshold. The most recent is Wisconsin that just dropped that in February of this year, but we had Colorado drop it. We had Iowa drop it. We had the state of Washington drop it. So we do have some that did that. And then we have 2 states that actually have an and test. So New York is $500,000 and 100 transactions. So you've got to meet both of those, which means if you sell very expensive things, but not very many of them, you may not get caught in New York. And then Connecticut is the other one. It originally had a 250,000 and 200 transactions. They dropped it to 100,000 and 200 transactions. So again, you have to meet both of those. Now, the next thing, which kind of goes to what we were just talking about with Sheila at the end of break, about what do you include when you start looking at when do I meet the threshold? And the states use 3 different definitions: gross sales, taxable sales, and retail sales. So gross sales means you have to include everything. So whether it is an intercompany sale, Sheila, whether it is a resale, whether it is an exempt product that is excluded from what is taxable, for example, a non-taxable service. And it also includes sales for to exempt entities or for resale. So gross sales, you have to include everything. Taxable sales is the one I wish more of the states would do. However, it's the one that the least number of states use. BJ state of Arkansas actually uses taxable, so I like that. And so what they say is you only count in, and Arkansas is 100,000 or 200 transaction test. You only count sales that would be taxable. And so those sales for resale, you exclude. Sales of items that are exempt. If you sell to a manufacturer and they are exempt, you exclude those. And then the middle one is retail. And so with retail, they say you get to exclude sales for resale. But if they are otherwise exempt, for example, an exempt service, or you sell to a not-for-profit or a manufacturer, you sell food in a state that food is exempt, you still have to count those. And so those are what you use to include whether or not it is subject to tax. The other piece that we look at for those of you that sell on marketplaces, so this could be you sell on Amazon or eBay or Walmart.com or one of the tens of thousands of specialized marketplaces that exist out there, whether or not, because the marketplace now has an obligation to collect that tax in almost every state, whether or not you include or exclude those marketplace sales when you're looking at whether or not you exceed the threshold. Okay. The next concept is once you cross the threshold, when do you need to start collecting the tax? Many of the states say it's the next transaction. Some of them say you have 30 days or first of the month following when you cross it, or Texas has the longest. They actually give you a 4-month, although there are some that you would say might be a little bit longer because they say you start on the first of the next year. And how you make that determination is looking at the measurement period for what do you use to measure whether or not you've exceeded that threshold. So most of the states use a prior or current calendar year, but there are some that only use the prior year, and some of them use a rolling 12-month or a rolling 4-quarter. So where can you see all that information? Well, we actually have a chart on our website, so I'm going to bring that up here. And so this is on our Sales Tax Institute page. And so here you can see the effective date, what that threshold is, what is the measurement, what is your includable sales, and how quickly do you need to register. So we were talking about Arkansas. So Arkansas was effective July 1 of 19. It's 100,000 or 200 transactions. You look at the prior or current calendar year. You look at taxable sales and you exclude those marketplace sales, but you need to register on the next transaction. So that is what you would do in Arkansas. If we look at a state like Michigan, so Michigan is very similar. It started earlier, October of 18, 100,000 or 200 transactions. But you look at the prior calendar year only, and you register January 1 of the following year. But they use gross sales and include the marketplace sales. So that is, an example of 2 different states that do kind of 2 very different things. And that is how you look at that. We talked about Massachusetts. So you can see here when a state changes their rule, we've got the old rule. So the old rule was 500,000 and 100 transactions. And then October 1 of 19, it switched to $100,000 only. So that is what you will be able to use to help make that determination. All right. So here is our map. So you can see that it is completely filled in with purple, that it is all enacted. The one exception is Missouri. It is still sitting on the governor's desk to be signed. This was our last holdout. We do have Florida and Kansas that will be effective July 1. Kansas has had a rule with a 0 threshold that has been in effect, but they are changing it effective July 1 to $100,000. So this map is almost completely filled in. We fully expect Missouri to be signed, but it is also not going to be effective until January 1 of 2023. So it is a bit of a delay on that. We've got all of the different effective dates and their bill numbers here in your materials. I'm not going to go through all those. You've got them. And certainly if you have any questions, feel free to let us know.